Sometimes an uneasiness comes into your life. It's a particular kind of unease that doesn't derive from crisis or failure. And it's harder to explain precisely because nothing has gone wrong enough to justify that going wrong. Your life still functions, you wake up every single day and you do what's expected of you and you move through your days fluidly without anything collapsing beneath you. There's no single mistake that defines everything. There's no single mistake that you can point to or no moment where everything is clearly derailed. And yet, underneath all the routine and all the so-called happiness and success, there's a constant, quite quiet friction. And it's kind of like you're slightly misaligned with your own existence. It's not enough to panic yet, and it's not enough to complain, but it's just enough to feel like something is off. Now, the issue with this kind of discomfort is that it doesn't give you its own permission to act. When something is obviously broken, change feels like a rational move to do. When something hurts, movement feels necessary. It's understandable, it's justifiable. However, when nothing is wrong in your mind and when everything looks fine from the outside, the dissatisfaction feels illegitimate in your head. And you start questioning your life instead of your circumstances. You start questioning yourself as a whole instead of the things that are happening around you. And you tell yourself over and over that you're ungrateful and you're dramatic and you're restless for no reason and that you're just lazy. And you assume this is what life starts to feel like once the drama fades and once the responsibility sets in. So you stay in that bubble. And you stay not because you're content, but because there's zero justification. There's no clear justification for leaving. You stay because things are manageable to you, because you're coping, because you think it's all right, because nothing right now is actively hurting you. You stay because change feels indulgent when you cannot articulate a concrete problem. And over time, the coping simply turns into living. Functioning simply becomes identity. You adjust so gradually and so slowly that you don't notice how much of yourself you sanded down just to fit into a life that technically works. What makes this state especially dangerous is how quiet it happens and how quiet it actually is. There is no emergency, there's no deadline, there's no need for someone to come and help you. That discomfort does not demand attention from you. Instead, it waits patiently in the background while you distract yourself with busyness and distract yourself with productivity and entertainment and noise and music and YouTube and games and everything like that. And it recedes when you're occupied and returns the exact moment that things slow down. It starts to return late at night. It starts to return early in the morning, in those moments of stillness. Maybe the 5 minutes after you've turned the car off and you're still sitting there. It returns when there's nothing left to do but feel. And you keep on waiting for clarity. That's the issue with it. You tell yourself that, if this feeling really actually mattered to me, it would be a lot louder. That if something truly had to change within your life, you'd feel it so much more strongly. You'd feel it so much more than you do right now. You expect dissatisfaction to come with an instruction manual, and you expect it to come with a clear direction attached to it. It's like, okay, I'm not satisfied with this. It should tell you to go that way. Except it doesn't. It just sits there. It sits there unresolved, and it asks you a question without giving you any sort of answer. It doesn't even tell you if your answer is correct or not. And because there's no obvious next step, because there's no direction you have to follow, you default to endurance. Over time, endurance then becomes a habit. Endurance becomes the way you live. That's the issue with this kind of thought process, with the state that you're living in. You learn how to live with that misalignment and you optimize around that misalignment. You find small comforts and you find small routines and small pleasures that make the days more and more tolerable. You get good at not looking at life too closely and simply living. You become skilled at filling in the silence. TikTok there, Instagram there, Spotify there, YouTube here and there, Netflix, etc., etc. And slowly, without any dramatic turning point within your life, you realize that it has become something you maintain rather than something you inhibit, rather than something you genuinely live in. And there's a subtle grief in the world that most people never name in their life. It's not grief for a loss, it's not grief for a person or a past version of themselves or anything like that, but instead it's grief for the life that you felt would be millions of times more vivid than the life that you're currently living. You remember expecting something a lot sharper, a lot more alive, and more distinctly yours as a child. You expected living in your dream, and you cannot tell whether that expectation was naive or whether this dullness is just a compromise that you never actually consciously agreed to, but you're living within every single day. And the most confusing part, I think, is that nothing feels terrible. You're not suffering in a way that demands sympathy from anyone, not even from yourself. You're just slightly removed from your own days, like you're watching yourself live rather than actually living. And because this distance isn't extreme, because this distance isn't super noticeable, it's easy to ignore. It's easy to rationalize and justify your living. And it's easy to tell yourself that everyone else also feels the exact same way, and noticing it too much is the real problem, not the way you're living. However, I'm here to tell you there is a difference between peace and solitude and numbness. And it's so easy to confuse the two when life is too stable. Peace has weight to it. Peace has its own tenacity within your life. It has presence. It's a sense of being where you are without any form of resistance within it. Numbness feels a lot lighter. Numbness feels emptier. It doesn't feel like it has any sustenance. It's less painful, but it's also a million times less real. And when nothing is wrong, yet nothing is right, it's often numbness masquerading as stability. You are not distressed enough to leave. However, you are not also alive enough to stay willingly. This state allows you, and it trains you, as a matter of fact, to postpone honesty within your life. You tell yourself over and over that you'll reflect on your life later. You'll go journal. You'll properly think about things later. That you're going to reassess once things calm down, once your emotions start to make more sense, once you have more time, or once you feel more and more certain. However, the irony and the paradox of this entire situation is that certainty never arrives in situations like this. There is nothing external pushing you into it. There's no event forcing you to make a change, forcing your hand, and so the decision remains deferred and delegated, and it remains like that indefinitely. Years can pass like this. I'm telling you, years and decades can pass living in this fake state, this fallacy. And it's not wasted years in the obvious sense. You are still doing things, you are still achieving things, you're still moving up in your job, you're still, graduating university, you're accumulating your experience. However, internally, something still feels unresolved. And it may even be that quiet sense that you're living adjacent to the life that you could be living instead of inside of it. And the longer and the more you postpone and the more you justify and ignore that feeling, the more normal that feeling becomes. And you stop expecting more, and the bar gets lowered enough to the point just to avoid disappointment. And that is how most people end up surprised by their own lives. They'll look up one day, they'll look up after decades, after years of being in a job that they don't enjoy, after years of being in a relationship that they realize they're simply moving in because they feel like they have nothing else to move past to. They look up that one day, and they realize that they've been tolerating something for years that they never actually chose. And it isn't because they were trapped within it. It's not like there was a labyrinth in their mind that they couldn't escape, but it's because nothing forced them to decide. It's because the absence of pain became the absence of urgency, and the absence of urgency became the absence of agency. The uncomfortable truth is that not all misalignment announces itself as suffering. Some of it shows up simply as dullness. Some of it shows up as neutrality. Some of it shows up as days that blur together without any resistance, as weeks that pass by without you recognizing that a week has just gone by. 7 days of your life that you'll never get back were just finished. And that kind of discomfort, where you're not actually understanding what's happening within your life, but you're just living by it, is a lot harder to respect, because it doesn't demand any immediate action. Instead, what it asks for is honesty, and it asks you to realize the life that you're living in. If nothing is wrong, then whatever comes next won't be an escape. It won't be a reaction to it. It won't be justified by collapse or crisis. It will be a choice. And that's what makes this state of living so difficult to sit with, because choosing without being forced to choose means taking responsibility for the direction of your life, even when nobody would blame you for staying at the exact same position that you already are in. Nothing being wrong does not mean nothing needs to change. It simply means that the reason won't be loud enough to make the decision for you.